And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with yet another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. Back on a Wednesday night doing some weeknight stuff. And we got a great show for you tonight. And let me bring on to introduce our fabulous panel of guests tonight is coming up on her 1-year anniversary of hosting podcasts, the one and only Chant Hannah. Chant, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for that.
Happy anniversary, Chant.
Not yet. We will be doing that anniversary show. I guarantee it. That will be a big, big deal. Thank you so much, though. Happy anniversary to you, too. I wanted to go ahead and introduce some really wonderful people. One I have interviewed before, and everyone here is going to talk about a very special topic called MADAR. It's about the MADAR Project. And I'm going to start off with introducing Francis L. Ridge, who has had 60 years in UFO investigation and research with major organizations. In 2017 of October, he set up MADAR 2 at new location in Newburgh, Indiana. And 2018, MADAR 3 worldwide system went operational in May with 22 sites in mostly the U.S. As of May 2019, there are 65 sites, 9 foreign. And the position statement of MADAR, Francis Ridge quote here, "There is no doubt that most UFOs are actually IFOs, identified, misidentified, etc. For the subset of events that cannot be explained, there is a group of sightings that demonstrates solid objects under intelligent control. I am convinced that these objects are somebody else's craft. Although I cannot prove that the intelligence behind the phenomena is ET in nature, I consider the ETH to be the least unlikely. I also feel that there is a nuclear connection, or one that indicates a cause and effect relationship with serious world events that could lead to a nuclear threat, and that the evidence in the form of military sightings indicates an overt military type operation," end of quote. And also wanted to talk to one of our guests on the show later about a presentation I believe Francis Ridge just did recently in Connecticut, MUFON chapter. The next person, of course, is Michael Panicello, the director of MUFON's Connecticut chapter, who I have had the pleasure and honor of interviewing before, is also a friend of mine, and Paul Wright, who runs MADAR France's Facebook page and is involved in MADAR. The MADAR 3 network page is what he runs, maintained by him. Node 131 France is what it's called, and that he's been interested in this phenomena since he was a kid, but only recently got involved with MADAR around end of 2017, and also worked on some cases with the Black Fault in 2018. Main focus at the moment is setting up and finding new tools to complement and work alongside MADAR. Welcome everyone to the show.
Welcome aboard. Unmute your mics. We're ready to go.
Hello. Thank
Hello.
you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and in that order, I believe that was Michael Panicello, and I think that was Fran, and then Paul Wright. But when you talk, gentlemen, be sure to identify yourselves so our audience knows who's speaking. And wanted to ask, Frank, did you have a question you want to start off with?
Yeah, it should be pretty simple for you guys. Tell us all about the idea behind getting this MADAR project together, and tell us a little bit about the gear that it makes use of.
Well, I'm Francis Ridge, and the MADAR thing, I've been working on that since 1960. But the whole idea for me was the idea of an early warning system. I mean, it's one thing to be an investigator. I did a lot of investigating, and I was at the mercy of the phenomena, and I wanted to improve our chances of getting more sightings investigated and witnessed by people like us who are trained. So I built one device back in 1960 and worked on that, improved on it, and didn't really get serious about it until 1973 when I got done traveling all over the place, the company I worked for used to transfer us a lot. And there's 2 or 3 years that I did that, the MADAR wasn't hooked up. So in 1973, when I got it hooked up, got caught right in the middle of the wave of 1973. So it was always a one-man, one-station operation for a long time, and we had several interesting events that took place. But my greatest hope was to have a number of stations located worldwide, operated by a number of trained people. And April of 2016, that's where I came up on the idea of how to make the MADAR 3. And it took us about 6 months to get started. And then after about 2 years of hard work on it, we were operational last May.
The question I wanted to ask you, Fran, is how does MADAR work?
Well, right off the bat, we knew we couldn't lose. That sounds kind of silly, but when you have 400 or 500 cases with vehicles being shut down and EM effects, and you have 150 cases where compass needles move, we knew that we had a winner. We just had to figure out how to do it. And what it basically does, the original MADAR was actually a physical compass that uses light beams to watch the movement. But this new MADAR is all electronic. It has a magnetometer. It has a electronic compass, which is a magnet variometer. It has the barometer. It also has on board an accelerometer, which we don't use yet, but it's there, so the people that have it already have it on board. We just haven't got the program written for it. All of this data from the MADAR is time dated with the universal time code. So basically what it does, it looks at the data about 15 times a second, and then every minute records those readings in milligauss, in degrees, in inches of mercury. And then when the device goes into alert start, it ramps up to once per second. So while it's recording.
Fran, what type of event is going to trigger this device?
Well, basically, like I was indicating a while ago, we know that UFOs and compasses, we have at least 150 cases where compasses moved. And so we knew that the magnetometer would also work, but we knew it'd be a lot more sensitive, which it turned out to be true. It's very, very sensitive. There may be times when we'll have an alert and not know what it was, of course, and we're not concerned about that. What we're concerned about is two things. If we have an alert and somebody reports a UFO, that's what we're looking for. But the primary thing is when we have an alert, we want to go out and look. So we're not really too concerned about all the other times that it goes off and we don't really know what it is.
I have other questions, but I wanted to skip to Paul Wright and ask him if he could just explain to us what kind of involvement he has in the MADAR project.
Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Yeah, I operate Node 131 here in France. And my primary focus at the moment is looking for other tools to help complement the MADAR project. And by that, I mean I'm currently looking at setting up a passive radar system using an RTL SDR dongle. That's a tiny little dongle that will plug into a laptop or a desktop, and you connect an aerial such as a Yagi 5 element, and that will scan the atmosphere, and using signals from other like TV station transmitters. In this case, I'm going to be using the Graves radar, which is based in Lyon, which I think is a military radar. I might not be right on that, but if anything enters the atmosphere, the radar will pick up these anomalies that are out there. So hopefully that'll match up with some of the MADAR hits, which will be really interesting.
Before I move on to Michael Panicello, the question I have for you is, did your equipment ever go off, and did you ever go outside and see anything?
Paul.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Paul.
Hi there. No, for me, this is still in development at the moment, so this is something that I'm going to be testing fairly soon with regard to getting MADAR hits.
Okay.
But with the MADAR system, we correct me if I'm wrong here, Fran, but I think we get emails that are sent to us when the MADAR system picks up an alert. I haven't actually got the system implemented where it'll send up an actual alarm, say, in the house to alert me right then that I can go outside and look. So I'm always slightly behind when we do get hits.
Thank you for that.
Real quick, Paul, before Champ moves along over to Michael.
Yeah.
Is there a ceiling for this particular device?
For the MADAR or for the passive radar?
How about both? If you got it.
Offhand, I don't know about the MADAR, but for the passive radar, as far as I know, it can literally go to the edge of the atmosphere.
Okay, so that's roughly
It's
what,
pretty
90,
far.
100,000 feet, right? If I remember
Something like
correctly.
that, yeah.
Okay.
Michael, I wanted to ask you, what is your involvement regarding the MADAR project?
Well, MUFON, Connecticut has been involved with it since the beginning with some of the testing and implementation of the MADAR. But we've been supporting it as best we can since it started.
And would it be fair to say that you actually have done YouTube videos on this regarding talking about the research on it, or what is the extent of the involvement?
Well, two of our members, Armando and a guy named Mike, they run 2 nodes in Connecticut. And we have talked about it on our ham radio nets that we run on Tuesdays. And that's probably what you're talking about in regards to discussing MADAR operations over the internet.
Yeah, and also wanted to ask you, is it correct that Fran Ridge visited your chapter and did a presentation recently or a while back?
Yes, he came to our November meeting via telephone. We did an audio presentation for our group. And everyone liked it. They found it very interesting.
Good.
And informative.
The nodes that are being run, that Mike and Armando Landrian are running, wanted to ask you, have they detected any unusual activity? And if so, did anybody see anything in the sky? Has anything like that happened? Or have they detected any anomalous activity that could not be explained or could be explained?
The data, both of them have had hits on their machines. I think Mike had some due to some more man-made objects, but he fixed that, and I think he's running smooth now. Any anomalies are run by Fran through the database on the MUFON side. I don't know of any in Connecticut that have corresponded directly with a MADAR hit.
Okay. So back to you, Fran. A question I have for you is, I have a few questions, but one question I wanted to ask you is, can you please state the main goals of the MADAR project?
Well, the main goal, of course, is to have an early warning system. And Paul really brought it out a while ago, what we were up against, because we went operational in May of last year. And I think you even mentioned that we had like 22. Was that what you said, that we had 22 sites when we started out. Well, now we
Right.
got close to 100. So basically, we need the number, and we're working out all kinds of little issues as we go. We're getting hits on most of the nodes. So what we have to do is to study those hits, watch how the numbers change, and of course they don't mean anything. They're uncorrelated targets unless we do get sightings. So we're right now working with MUFON to check sightings for the previous week. And actually also we're going back a year because we weren't doing it back at that time with MUFON's help. So they're checking the June sightings of last year. And again, the most important thing is to work out a system where it's actually an early warning system, and we didn't build that in. The device, if you've seen the device, it's so small that we couldn't have incorporated an alarm panel there, because that would, first of all, it would have taken a lot more space, and it also would have been an EM source, so it would have been triggering the device too. So you have to buy a little $25 device now to make an alarm panel, and we're trying to get everybody equipped with that.
I just wanted to let our other guests know, anytime you want to interrupt and talk, please do, because this show's about you and MADAR. So by all means, please jump in and start talking if you feel like you have something to add to the discussion. One reason, Fran, why MADAR is so successful was the wow signal. Can you please chime in on that?
Yeah, the first sightings that we had tied to MADAR were unbelievably almost like coincidental. They would occur within a few days, and it was enough to get us excited. But it wasn't until 1977 that we had 7 sightings in July and August. And right before I get to the wow signal, I want to mention that on the 12th of July, we had a MADAR event that police reported there were sightings 65 miles and 85 miles away, 2 different directions at the same time. So that gave us a clue that a lot of times UFOs operate over large distances. So by August the 15th, we had the biggest event that we'd ever recorded. 3 minutes and 29 seconds and 18 pulses, and the radiation doubled. Well, at the time that happened, we didn't know about the wow signal. So when I wrote my book, I never mentioned the wow signal, didn't know about it. 32 years later, we found out that the wow signal, 310 miles away at that observatory, occurred at the exact same time. And it's hard to think of a coincidence there. So we think that was very important.
So one of the questions I had planned on asking you was, can you share an instance where a detection by a MADAR unit conclusively showed us data caused by a UFO? Would that instance fall under that, or is there another instance you can share regarding that question?
Those started after. Those started right after the 1973 incident.
Okay.
And, if I can look here real quick, I can give you a clue.
Okay.
Well, let's put it this way: there was a series of sightings during that massive sighting wave, one of which was the coin case in Mansfield, Ohio, the Pascagoula incident, the DEFCON 3 over the Arab-Israeli war. We had local sightings. We had one sighting, actually 2 sightings locally at the same time MADAR went off. And the whole year went along without any MADAR events until November the 1st. And it was striking to see the graph where MADAR was right at the peak.
Okay.
Really quick.
Go ahead.
Fran, really quick, did you ever, regarding the wow signal, did you ever follow up with Dr. Jerry Amon, who found that signal in his data, and see what he thought?
Never did. We've kind of worked towards it, but the feeling is that he probably wouldn't want to talk with anybody dealing with UFOs. And,
Right.
and really, we run into the same thing with my discovery of the anomaly on the backside of the moon at Paracelsus C. I was working with NASA on different aspects of that, and the minute I brought that report up and reported it, I lost contact with all those people.
Fran, realizing that many things can alter a magnetic field, how do you discern the difference between completely normal events versus a UFO?
Well, we don't get too concerned about it if we don't have a sighting. So the way we look at it, if you have an anomaly reported and there's no sighting, it's what we call an uncorrelated target. But if we have a sighting, then then it becomes important. The only thing we have to watch is someone may have a MADAR unit. It may trigger, and they may go out and see an airplane, and if they're too far out, they might consider that to be a UFO. So we have to be very careful about that.
That's a good segue. Just one sec. Sorry, Frank.
That's all right.
To lead to the next question I have, which is, Fran, who analyzes any data that is collected at an event?
Right now, we have about 50 members with different degrees of expertise. And if we, after going over the data with MUFON and those people, if we have something that looks very compelling, we're right now working on a group of people that can do it independently.
So slightly similar question, who investigates the triggered events noticed by the unit?
Right now, the way we have it set up, MUFON, we would work with the state director, and they would do the investigation.
Okay, Frank, go ahead.
Basically, for something to really get your attention, you would want a MADAR alert and then an independent witness, somebody who doesn't have the radar node. You would want that independent witness to have witnessed something and reported it. So is that about right for something to really get your follow-up?
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why we also record aircraft transmissions, because if that, to me, would be one of the highest rated. If some pilot talking to a control tower 100 miles away would be reporting an unusual object, that would be pretty compelling to me, and I think most other people too.
So then, Fran, what, if anything, is done with the data collected? And who uses it? How is it shared for research purposes?
We haven't got that far yet, but we're right at the point where that's being considered.
Okay.
What to do and how to do it.
And another quick question. You've got these MADAR alerts going off, and obviously not everybody can be, sort of around their node 24/7. People have to sleep and so on and so forth. Are these things running and go to work and all that good stuff? So are these devices, are they running 24/7? Are people shutting them down and only running them, when they're at home and just kind of relaxing? I mean, how does that part of the system work?
They're running 24/7, and all the data goes to the server, and the server records those data lines that I described at once per minute. It's called a status line, and then when you go into alert, it's alert at once per second.
Okay, and that there's one centralized server that does this?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. And let's say an alert goes off and somebody's not home. The centralized server, will the server get the alert as well, or how exactly does that work?
The server gets the alert and sends an email.
Okay.
An alert email to the op, and also they get a cell phone text message.
Okay.
Okay, Fran, I've got a kind of a hardball question for you, and that is, how would your unit for hundreds of dollars be any different than, say, having a compass or using a magnometer like an application called Tesla Meter 11 that Rich Hoffman mentioned on our previous show?
All of those, and even the tri-field, and the I'm trying to think of that fourth one. There's one that has lights on it. Are basically like the ghost hunters use.
Mm-hmm,
And and they would be like, they would be used if someone saw a UFO and they would grab one of those and see what they can do. And the odds against that are kind of rare, but I would still suggest that they do that. But none of those would automatically and would not be running 24/7 and
okay.
And store data.
And store data. And so how sensitive is the unit?
Oh, it's very sensitive. Too sensitive, but we would rather have that and have a lot of uncorrelated targets rather than miss something. So right now we're running them at a threshold of what we call 30 milligauss, and some of those are triggering twice a week.
Okay.
And again, it doesn't matter unless there's something reported. So.
And what type of things come up that trigger false positives?
Very few, because of that inverse cube of the distance. I know one time my wife pulled the car up real close to the office door and triggered it. It was like 2 feet away. But in most cases, a fire truck or a UPS truck or a train might go by, it wouldn't trigger it. Now, one guy in Georgia claimed a C-130 flew over treetop level and triggered it. But it was carrying electronic equipment, so we don't really know.
Okay, so a few more questions. One connected to what you just said. Is some kind of a barometer or some kind of part of your equipment that can desensitize the sensitivity level, if you can understand what I'm saying, so that it doesn't pick up everything. Can you actually lower the sensitivity level of the equipment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there a warranty with this unit? If so, for how long?
Actually, I'm not saying we're hard up. It's just that we want all the devices running we can. So we've gone well over, bent over backwards to make sure they stay running properly. So we haven't had any real issues that way.
Is there any kind of maintenance involved, like any kind of calibration that has to be done on like on a yearly basis or quarterly basis, anything like that?
No.
So Fran, how does one know if the unit is working or not? So let's just say I have one in front of me. How do I know it's working?
First thing you could do is go to the MADAR.site and click on the node. And if the node shows that the time is correct, you know that it's running. Now, if the numbers, if it's running but the numbers are never changing, that would indicate, something is wrong. And so far we haven't had anything like that happen.
And I would like to mention to our listeners, I'm on the MADAR site right now. So what you would do is you would type in www.madar.site. SITE. And on this site, what you can do is you can use your cursor, click on the pad that you have in front of you, the mouse pad if you're on a laptop, or use your mouse if you're on a computer. And you can actually zoom in and out and control the distance level, and also grab the screen and move it up and down to be able to see where all the MADAR, is it the MADAR units I'm looking at right now?
Yes.
Or is it all the hits?
That's the MADAR location.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, real quick, Paul, you're over in France. Are you plugged into the U.S.-based network, or do you have your own independent network in France?
No, it's connected back to France server.
Wow. Okay.
And by the way, if you wanted to see Mike Panicello's group, you really would have to zoom in because the dots are so close together. We have quite an array over there.
Michael, my question to you is, what prompted your interest in the MADAR topic? In other words, why get involved at all? What was in it for you as far as getting involved in the MADAR project?
Well, I really got involved because one of my members wanted to get involved with it, and he liked it, and I wanted to support him and do what I can to promote it within the chapter to help him improve it because he liked it. I like it because it can't hurt to try having another way of looking for UFOs on a more regular basis. And once it gets proven, I look forward to it being a regular part of ufology.
Are you talking about Mike and Armando or one of them? Yep. Yeah. Armando's a really wonderful person. He's a friend of mine also. He is, I mean, if you want to say deeply involved, it seems like he is regarding the MADAR Project. I think he also is involved in, would it be fair to say, ham radio interest? He's an enthusiast of that.
We both are.
Yeah. Also, there's quite a few people who don't really know what ham radio is. Can you explain to us, what does that mean? What is it?
Ham radio is amateur radio. The ham is more like just the jargon of it. So on the radio spectrum, some of the radio waves are put aside for communication by basically talking to a device. The most common way people think of it is CB radios. If you watched on TV with the truckers, Citizen Band, that's kind of gives you an idea of what ham radio is. Ham radio is one level higher. You get licensed by the FCC. You can, we run all kinds of nets. For example, we run a Skywarn net, not me particularly, but ham radio in general. We participate in a lot of public service. So Skywarn is a way where we will, in a storm, monitor the weather. So when you're watching your local forecast, for example, on a Thursday night or whenever, and it's like, well, we had 3 inches of snow here, 4 inches of snow there. Ham radios were involved in collecting that data, ham radio operators. And so it's a rewarding field for service and just regular communication. And for ufology, we use it for trying to promote the field and combine the two fields into one. And since Armando's a ham and I'm a ham, we decided to run a net. And it's been picking up. It's pretty popular, and we enjoy it. And people enjoy listening to it.
Michael, I was going to ask you, if people in Connecticut or even outside of Connecticut want to travel to your chapter to listen to presentations by speakers from all over the world, where do they go? What's the address? How do they actually go see these wonderful presentations that Connecticut MUFON has?
Well, you can see all of our information on MUFONCT.com. There's a link to the Connecticut MIDAR page, which will talk about our involvement in the MIDAR program. Mm-hmm. There's a link to our YouTube page, so if you want to see our ham radio nets live, if you're curious about what ham radio is, you can go on there. And any kind of events that we have, I post on that website as well. So that's the easiest way to answer your question. If they want to see what we're doing and see some of our videos of our presentations, it's all linked to our website.
Thank you. Just one question left for you, Michael. Did you ever get involved in NICAP in any way, shape, or form?
No, I've never worked with NICAP.
However, Fran has. And Fran, I wanted to ask you, can you please share with us your involvement in NICAP, your role, and just a little bit about that?
Well, of course, NICAP was, along with APRO, the two major organizations when I was a young man getting out of high school. And when I got involved with NICAP, they had about 18 subcommittees. And I got a team of investigators together and 3 advisors. We had a 7-man team, and we were Indiana Unit 1, which is one of 4 in Indiana. That went until about the mid-'70s when NICAP went under, and of course MUFON was getting going, getting started.
Yeah. Okay, so there's 32 people on your A team who have participated in your NICAP research over the years. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and then the chronology of NICAP, can you just kind of share a short blurb on that? And then I wanted to move on to another topic.
Yeah, for those of you who read Kehoe's books, he had chronos in his books. And of course, they were the early years. And then when NICAP got started, they continued that on up to about 1964 when they put out the UFO evidence. So when I got the NICAP site going in the mid-90s, we took those, we improved on them, and of course added the following years. So each year has chronological listings. They're very brief. And in most cases, at least the important ones, there's a hot link that you can click on that takes you to the directory.
Right.
The directory has a little bit, a short story, but it has all the pertinent documents.
Right. The database and link information, the full story and documents on the NICAP site right there.
Yes.
Can you please share with us a little bit about Ruppelt's book, maybe an anecdotal story about that?
Yeah, there's quite a story about that. I got in trouble over that. That's still, to me, one of the most important books, and anybody into this field should definitely read that book. And it's free. It's actually free on the NICAP site, by the way.
Okay.
And
That's where I found it.
Yeah, and I was in the 8th grade, and I was in the middle row, approximately 2 or 3 people back from a young man who was reading that book in class. And he and I were friends, and he passed it back to me, and it was the pocket book, the Dell version, like a Bantam version. And we were both paging through that during class, and we got detention over it.
You recommend people actually look at the Mantle case, which at first you had a lot of doubts about until you investigated, and you came to a different conclusion on it. Channel 14 interviewed you on that. It took 2 years to finalize the conclusion on it. And if folks want to read more about that, regarding that investigation, all they need to do is go to the MADAR site for the Mantle and Ruppelt book, as you're saying. Can you tell us a little bit about that Mantle case, please?
Well, almost all of us had written it off for years and years and years. I mean, Ruppelt mentioned it. He explained it as a skyhook balloon, and for decades after that, just about every responsible researcher that had read into it basically read what Ruppelt had available, and there was nothing new. But then later on, we got into the FOIA documents, and we found one that said that he had an operating oxygen system, which blew everybody away. And then, of course, we got we had to buy, but we bought the accident report, and my A team went over all that data, and the conclusion was that the object he was chasing wasn't unknown.
Yeah, and just for the folks who might not be really familiar with that case, January 1948 in Kentucky, they were getting a number of UFO sightings. Citizens as well as state police were, they were seeing this UFO, and enough people had reported to the local airport. I believe it was Godwin, I believe, was the Air Force base. But anyway, they had contacted a group of 4 P-51s that were just happened to be flying by. I think they were heading from Georgia, and I'm not sure what their destination was. But they were asked to go take a closer look. And one of them, of course, was Captain Mantell. He got a beat on the UFO, was tracking it, was following it up to very high altitudes, and ultimately he crashed as a result of his chasing this UFO. So it was a huge story at the time, and the story had always been that, basically that he didn't have his oxygen system wasn't ready to go. They weren't expecting to fly that high, so he didn't have oxygen. He may have just ran out and suffered from hypoxia, and that's what caused them to lose control of the plane and ultimately crash and tragically end up dead. So it was a huge case back in the day. But you're saying that the P-51, the oxygen was actually ready to go, and he should have been able to use it.
And he probably did. Now we're thinking it was probably defective in some way, and that he actually did. He died from the crash. It wasn't anything, alien related or anything like that. But what came out in the investigation was that the wingmen lied, and it was amazing the facts and the details that we found out. For one thing, they used a Plan 62, which as he was chasing the object, airports that were listening in could hear everything he said.
There were a lot of reports that they had some very interesting things to say as he got a beat on it.
Oh yeah, he said it was large and metallic, tremendous in size, and said he was going to go up a little higher. But the big thing was the Air Force pretended that there wasn't much UFO activity in the area, and it turns out there were some real good UFO sightings starting over in Ohio. So.
I wanted to ask Michael Panicello a question. I interviewed you a while back, I think it was last year, Michael, and I asked you to please share a list of UFO cases that influenced you regarding the most evidence of a possible extraterrestrial presence or crafts. And you said the Rendlesham Forest incident, the O'Hare Airport UFO sighting, the Belgium wave sightings, Malmstrom Air Force Base UFO incident, and Roswell. Michael, do you have any other case that you would like to add to that list?
For popular cases, I think the Phoenix Lights. I've been reading a lot more about the Phoenix Lights the last few years, and I don't remember if it was before or after you interviewed me. We had Peter Davenport come on do a lecture for our chapter. And his whole lecture was on the Phoenix Lights. And when he describes the reports that he got in the night of the site of that event, it was something unique. Now, whether it was ours, it was something classified, or it was extraterrestrial, I don't know. But it was definitely an unknown. So I think I would add that one to the list because he gave an excellent presentation. And, he had a lot of new information that I didn't know about, and then so I would put that one in there as well.
Okay, and then also when I asked you what is the most interesting case you've worked on, you said I worked on an abduction case a few years ago. The person has had a unique experience. The case is still going on, so you can't talk much about it, but for sure it has raised a lot of questions that need to be answered. Why is it my most interesting case you've worked on? You would say because of how it's working out. There are parts that are classic abduction and parts that are man-made. Was something going on in this case we don't know yet? Can you share with us in the most general manner what did happen with that case?
The witness, you want me to just rehash what the witness was home alone on a Friday night. The person was in bed. They heard a loud thump. They saw three little aliens that described as typical grays. The person was paralyzed, couldn't move his body. When he woke up, the grays were gone. And the interesting thing about it was some of the characteristics. I mean, the characteristics of the abduction was he saw a blue light, which is common with abductions. The way that the aliens were described was typical grays in description. The size matched what a gray size would be. Their interest in him was a guy, and his son also matches with abductions as they usually happen within families, or there's a family connection. It's usually never an isolated abduction. The things that were weird was he heard like a hissing sound in the background that he couldn't explain, and we couldn't really explain. He never was abducted before or after, according to him. His offspring, his child, doesn't report any abductions. Clean background, nothing unusual with the guy in his background. So, it's something that it's just random. We can't really figure out like why they wanted him or what they needed him for. But it's still. I guess it's still ongoing. We closed it as an unknown. We moved on. We haven't heard from the guy since, so I assume he's okay. But he has our numbers if he ever needs us.
Last time I interviewed you, you also said you've never had a UFO sighting. Is that still true?
Yeah, I thought I've had two, but I went on and looked at the plane radar data, and one was a UPS and one was a FedEx aircraft going into Bradley.
Okay.
They were both on final approach. So they look like triangles because they were low and they had their navigation lights on, but they were just craft that were ours.
I'm glad you mentioned that triangle shape because Rich Hoffman was mentioning he had a case where there were satellites that were actually multiple ones in the shape of a triangle. So it's important for our listeners to know that that's possible also. I wanted to also let our listeners know one thing that Michael said, and that is Hynek had the right idea that evidence and scientific approaches to ufology are the best ways to make the field credible. Sources get people to go on the record, find factual data and documents to use in your presentations and papers. Pie in the sky thinking is good. However, it is not taken serious by the mainstream media, the scientific community, or most people who are critical thinkers. And then you gave an example. You attended a conference once and the featured speaker was giving all this info about multiple dimensions and aliens. That was hearsay at best. After the lecture was over, the speaker was ripped to pieces by the audience's questions. If someone new to the field of ufology heard the speaker as their first intro to the field, it would have looked pretty bad in your opinion. And basically you were just saying research that's credible needs to be what brings credibility to this field. How do you feel about what you said there, Michael? Do you have any more to add to that?
No, I think that still stands. So I still stand by that, yeah.
Okay, and so I was going to ask Paul Wright a question. Paul, can you please tell me a kind of a pointed question? Let's say you do have a MIDAR unit and it goes off and you for some reason have this strange feeling that there's something outside that might not be airplane, satellite, or easily identifiable. Then you go outside and it's exactly that. It's an anomalous craft. What do you do? What would you do if that happened to you and you could not identify what it was and it was hovering over where you lived?
It'd be great if I could film it first off.
Okay.
I'd pick up the phone to Fran straight away. That's the first thing I do.
You have Fran on speed dial.
Hopefully, yeah.
All right. Okay. And Frank, did you have any questions for Fran?
I wanted to double back, Fran. This was something that I turned up doing a little background preparing for this show regarding NICAP. It's something I didn't realize before, and that NICAP was founded by the inventor T. Townsend Brown, who was actually heavily involved in research regarding anti-gravity. And I know it was likely he was involved a little bit before you joined the organization. But if you had any thoughts on all that.
Well, although I always avoided the story of T. Townsend Brown and a lot of the historic things because I'm so wrapped up in the present, And we had so much going. But these weird coincidences we run into. I didn't tell you, but one of the reasons why I got involved was because a man that worked for Project Sign had told me how to finish the Geiger counter I was working for in high school. And because of that, I got involved with making a UFO detector, basically similar to the Cartwright detector. So he was with Project Sign. What are the odds of that?
That's incredible. Okay, and Fran, I wanted to ask you if anyone is interested in MIDAR and purchasing a unit. Uh, we'll go ahead and let them know where to go, online to do that. But right now, how much are they running for?
$240. And they go to that site that you mentioned, and it has at the top of the page, it has purchase.
Yep.
Okay, and so our listeners know where to go. They would go to www.madar.site. Is that right?
Correct.
And I'll have
Okay.
a link to that in the description, so that'll be easy to find.
Good. We did a wonderful kind of pre-interview with Fran last night, and Frank, you and Fran were talking about some really fascinating cases. One was the coin helicopter case, and incidentally, Dick Cavett did a show on that, as you were saying, Fran, and so did Hickson. And you can't see any of those on YouTube. Nobody can seem to find them. If any of our members can, by the way, please let us know. We'd love to see those shows. Be sure to download them first and then send us the link so they don't take them off YouTube before you can get them. But can you, Fran or Frank, chime in on the coin helicopter case?
I just know that it's a favorite case of an awful lot of people. Basically, it involved an Ohio National Guard helicopter pilot, Lieutenant Coyne, and he and his crew were flying from Columbus to Cleveland, or roughly Cleveland area. And in flight, what they encountered was a UFO that also raised their altitude in a matter of seconds, raised the actual altitude of the helicopter several thousand feet. There were also ground sightings of this UFO. So it was an extraordinary case. And of course, Fran was discussing a correlation between some of the sightings and the hits that he was getting in Indiana with this particular case. So I know it's a favorite of a lot of people. Fran, what are your thoughts on the coin helicopter case?
Well, it was a tremendous case, and a lot of people, it perked them up. And what we found, though, there was a sighting at the same time in Mount Vernon over on Ford Road, and this woman had just gone to bed, and she heard this vibrating noise, throbbing noise. And she went outside, and she saw this huge tubular-shaped object that looked like it had a lot of lights all over it. And it had just passed through the VOR, which is a mile from her house, between her and the river. So it was seen at the same time, so it indicates, that there was something going on over that region at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, we were talking about how there was a UFO in Indiana, Mount Vernon, 15 miles from Evansville during the mid-'70s last night. Fran, do you remember that?
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of information on that? A little bit more?
Yeah. The reason why we were out where we were, people were reporting what looked like a rotating disc. The lights on it were rotating. And we watched it several nights in a row, and the control tower told us that the FAA was testing a new lighting system called See and Be Seen. So this jet from Memphis would be coming in, and it'd be hundreds of miles out, and you could see it would be like an orange in color because of the dirty atmosphere. And then as it got close, the lights would separate and be bright like headlights. And then the object would turn on its approach and drop to 8,000 feet, and they'd kick on all these lights. And that's what people were seeing. So me and two other guys with three different automobiles and CB radios went out to OP1, which is the Cemetery Hill, and we were watching this and marveling over it. But while we were there, and this is really one of the reasons why I'm still doing what I'm doing, while we were there, something came out of the west that looked like an ambulance. It had the lights going around it, similar to the object seen in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Right.
Highway. Yeah. And as it was coming towards us, it turned south and headed right down the highway. But being new in the area, I wasn't familiar with the roads, and the next day we found out there was no road there. So whatever it was came over a cornfield, straight towards us, and headed south. And to this day, I can't help but believe somebody knew we were there.
That's amazing.
Too bad you didn't have your cell phone with you.
Correct. Now, there was no UFO sightings going on that whole week or that whole month.
Yeah, that was an amazing time. That's the period that first got me into being interested in the UFOs. That 1973 time frame. Paul, I wanted to jump over to you. Now you're headquartered in France now, and I also couldn't help but notice your marvelous British accent. So I wanted to ask you. It seems like, at least in France, we hear that the subject of the UFOs is taken a little bit more seriously than it might be here in the States. And wondered, can you talk a little bit about that and talk about, are there any differences between how it's accepted in France vis-a-vis the UK and the US? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I know of Japan here in France. They seem to take forever to get their data out on their website. They're hard to approach. They're not very forthcoming with information. But it to me, coming from the UK, it seems very sort of closed doors here with regard to UFOs, albeit taken seriously at the same time.
So the folks who take it seriously, yeah, it does. The folks who take it seriously, but they don't share openly what the data they've gathered.
That's right. No.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. Well, I wanted to let everybody know that if they want to find out more about the MUFON Connecticut chapter, all they have to do is go on Facebook and look up facebook.com/groups/MUFON-CT. And MUFON is MUFON. So that's facebook.com/groups/MUFON-CT. And then they have a page, which is relatively the same URL. It's facebook.com/MUFON Connecticut. And Michael Panicello is the director of MUFON Connecticut. Thank you very much for having been on the show today. And then we also had Paul Wright on, who runs the MADAR system in France for Fran Ridge. And you're basically working on more equipment, right, regarding the MADAR node, I suppose. Is that is that the terminology I would use to refer to it, or what would you call it?
The MADAR node.
Okay. And then, thank you. And then we had Fran Ridge, who is the head of MADAR, and he's had 60 years regarding the topic of ufology and studying and researching it. And we're just so very grateful to have had you on the show. Want to direct people to please go to his site, which is www.madar.site, and would like to ask Fran and everybody else to please come back on our show again next year. And I recommend probably late next year when there's more developments going on with the equipment. Paul, would you be willing to come back on with us to give us a report on that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, when you got some hot stuff, it's only a matter of time if you keep the gear running.
That's right. Time is key. Yeah.
And then Michael, I would love to ask Armando and Mike to join us on the show also regarding their MIDAR equipment experiences. And of course, Fran, we cannot have a show without you. So we would love to have you all back on the show again next year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. I sure do appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you very much. Well, everybody, Chant, thanks to our guests, Michael, Panicello, Fran Ridge, and Paul Wright. Thanks for joining us. And amazing tech we've got here. We don't have a MADAR set up here, but we got some amazing tech to bring these people in from all over the States and even over into Europe. So thanks again, fellas. Thanks, Chant, for setting this up. I sure do appreciate that. And is there anything else you've got for us in closing?
I do. I really recommend people buy this unit. And one reason why is we all want to learn more about this topic. It's vitally important that we all put forth an effort to find out more about it. And if you have the discretionary income to spend to buy a unit, I highly recommend doing so. So you can go ahead and do that on their site at www.madar.site. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening.
Alrighty, thanks a lot, everybody. Good night, and we'll be seeing you soon with another fine show. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.